The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have with us this morning three members from the House of Delegates. Delegate Mike Futrell.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Glad I could be here.
Delegate Mark Cole.
Thank you for having me.
Speaker Bill Howell.
Thank you. Good
How
to be
are you
here.
doing, sir?
Great, thank you. Doing well.
I think you've been here about 28 years, but the session has gone really well so far.
This has been a good one. Yeah, it's been relatively free of large controversies. It looks like we're going to get a budget on time. You know, this is the short session where we make amendments to the two-year budget that we wrote last year. The governor offers amendments, and then the House and the Senate, make changes. And then they put their two bills together and have the conference committee. And the conferees are meeting earlier than they have in recent years, and I'm hopeful that we'll get out of here on time.
Now, what are some of the major differences between what the governor offered and what the House managed to present?
The governor, in his budget amendments, provided some funding for salary increases for deputy sheriffs. We took that a lot further. We included raises for state workers, state troopers, constitutional officers, and teachers. And I think it's very important that we really scraped to try and find the money, cut some of the things that he had suggested. We do have a little more revenue coming in than we'd anticipated. And so from all those sources, we've been able to give some much-needed raises to teachers and state workers.
I also understand there's funding now for a couple of new veteran support centers in the state.
Yes, sir. That's something we've been talking about for some time. I have policy committees that start meeting in the late summer talking about different ideas for the coming session. And one of the things that we decided we'd like to try and do is create two new veteran care centers, one in Hampton Roads, one in Northern Virginia. These are state-of-the-art places where the veterans can go for medical treatment. And it's a combination of a local match and the state funding and a federal funding. And we've got the first two. We have the local matches and the state funding. We're working on the federal funding. We're hopeful we'll get that and be able to start these two much-needed centers.
Great. Delegate Cole, tell us how things are going on in your district. We've had some tough economic times the past few years, but how are things going?
Well, things are going along okay. As you said, the economy hasn't been as good as we would like it to be. Certainly not how it was before the crash. It's kind of like we've been limping along. As you know, our area has a lot of federal employees and contractors, so what Washington does has a fairly significant impact in our area, and they're dealing with struggling with their budget situation in Washington, and that tends to have ripple effects throughout the state, which is kind of hurt our economy.
So it's definitely time to continue the effort to diversify the economy.
Absolutely. We need to, I think, long term, this is not something that can be done in a short session. Long term, we need to look at our tax code, state and local, because a lot of our taxes, and some of them are local taxes, they tend to discourage businesses and innovation, and really we need some, I think, leadership from the governor in this area, where we sit down and look at our entire tax code and try to reform it, not use it as an excuse to raise taxes, but actually reform it so that it's a more business-friendly environment in the Commonwealth.
So we need to change that tax code, so to speak, in order to maintain the businesses that we have here, but more importantly, to attract new business.
New businesses and new jobs, to try to diversify our economy so that we're not so dependent on the federal government.
Delegate Futrell, how about your district in terms of dependence on the federal government?
Well, naturally, I have a lot of federal workers, especially as we deal with, as we're going down the Route 1, State Route 1. And we saw that after the government shutdown that we had a little while back, and we saw the impact that it had when we went door to door and we're talking to the families, and you see just how many people were affected by that. And I agree, Delegate Cole has said, just like we do need to look into our tax systems and the things that we have set up. Currently, one of the bills that I put in this year put a sunset date on all tax credits that didn't currently have one, even the ones that were grandfathered in. Not to say that we couldn't reapply for those, but I said let's put a sunset date on all of those. So that way we make sure that those things are doing the things that we need them to do, which is one of the bills that we put in. It didn't have an opportunity to go through this time around. I'll be interested to see what the future holds for it. But as we look at the impact, and as you were talking about diversifying, one of the things that my staff and I tried to sit down and do is figure out what are some of the things that we can do to bring additional revenue into the Commonwealth. I understand some of the conversations that we've had about, we've got to cut this and we've got to cut that. And when you start doing things like that, what you realize is no one's happy. I have these conversations all the time when people come sit down into my office, and they're all great causes, and you want to be able to have additional funding for them. But the question is, what can we do to bring revenue into the Commonwealth, which hence one of the bills that I put in was going to put together a state infrastructure fund. Unlike what we currently have in a system where we would be based off of bonds, what the fund was going to do was have the opportunity to bring in public and private investments into our state infrastructure projects. So hence, if I wanted to bring the metro down to Woodbridge, which would cost me $10 billion or so, just throwing a number out there, we would then have the opportunity to have, the state of California, Oprah, or Bill Gates invest into that, so therefore our localities wouldn't have to take those huge lump sums off of our books. And the way that we set that bill up was we actually would put it under the treasurer. Chances are we would have RFP'd it out to a Merrill Lynch or someone of the sort. And then what we would have been able to do from there is not just focus on the monetary returns that we were trying to bring back, but also focus on how many jobs that we could create in the process. So what we wanted to do was come up with some innovative ideas and opportunities for us to bring some revenue into the Commonwealth so we don't run into some of those situations again. We do have to diversify, and we do have to do other things. But instead of us just always having to make these cuts, let's see what we can do to build our revenue, and that's kind of how we approached it.
Speaker Howell, talk to us a little bit about how the funding bill that was passed a couple of years ago in terms of transportation is being implemented.
That's a great question, Woody. In 2013, we passed legislation that significantly increased funding for transportation in Virginia. And as you may remember, we were really at a crisis point. Projections were that we would run out of money for new construction in the year 2016. All the money would be consumed in maintenance. Since then, since the funding that we've realized through the bill in 2013, there are projects on the books and things, and we're moving ahead. But in 2014, we thought it would be helpful to measure the way we spend this money and try and be a little more scientific about it, if you will. And we asked the Department of Transportation to come up with a system where they can measure a particular road project on how much it's going to do to reduce congestion, how much it will do to help increase safety and perhaps economic development. And they can get these metrics, and we can decide between Project A and Project B which one is going to give us the more bang for our buck, more money for what we invest in it. And in 2015, in this session, we've kind of fine-tuned that bill a little bit further. The bill passed the House 98-2, and it fine-tunes the metric system. It analyzes. It also streamlines the money flow in VDOT itself, in the Department of Transportation. It takes, previously, we have 10 different buckets of money. We've reduced that to 3, and it's going to be a lot more transparency. And I think we're going to see the local transportation districts getting significantly more money for local projects. So I think we've made some great strides in how we generate additional funds for transportation, but also how we spend it wisely.
And Delegate Cole, how important is this new prioritization process to your district?
I think it's very important because too often politics enters into the equation as to what transportation project gets funded and so forth. And so we have taken steps in the last couple of years to try to make it based more on data and information and congestion relief rather than on the politics of the matter. And you know, the bill, this year's bill that the speaker referenced would take a significant amount of money out of the hands of political appointees in Richmond and send it down to the local transportation districts, where I think better decisions would be made on what priority projects need to be funded with that money.
Now, I also understand another key feature and element is return on investment that we must look at now.
Well, and we're setting up a criteria on how do you measure return on investment when it comes to a road project or a transportation project. And really, I think the number one metric ought to be, especially in our area, congestion relief. How much, you know, congestion relief is this project going to bring with it?
Now, is your district a mix of urban and rural, but more urban than rural?
Yes. Now, mind you, I have the tale of two cities. I have Prince William County and Woodbridge, and I have Stafford County. And so as we start talking about these transportation issues, you know, anyone who lives on the Route 1 corridor understands we're prisoners in our own homes Friday after 2 o'clock. I mean, it's locked up traffic. It's locked up traffic in the mornings. So we do have to do some of those things. Currently, I'm nestled right in between Quantico Marine Base, which I represent, and as well as Fort Belvoir. So you have a lot of these military personnel in the morning traveling to and fro. Just like when I met with the base commander at Quantico, he said, you know, something like 35% of my base lives in Stafford and Fredericksburg. But the situation that we currently have right now, to bring it into perspective, is there's not even a bus system that connects Stafford County and Prince William County. So even if those people didn't want to be in their cars, for the most part, they have no choice. I mean, yes, we do have the VRE, but where it lets out on the base, you know, it's not necessarily conducive to be able to get from one side to the other in all of those scenarios. So just like, again, one of the bills that we put in was going to create a pilot program to hopefully extend those services. So therefore, again, I can't do a huge bill that would completely reconstruct everything that we're doing with transportation. You know, again, as we talked about House Bill 2 and some of the changes that we've made to the system. But what we can do is figure out what are some of the things that we can do to at least give some sort of relief. Because again, and this is also something that would help our overall economy in Prince William, because again, we want to be able to bring in businesses and things of that nature, but if you have the traffic problems that we currently have in our districts, it's tough to encourage a business to come out there and come to our overall districts. So that's what we continue to work with, and you know, again, we see what's in front of us, but the real question becomes, what can we do to give some sort of relief to the people? And hence my pilot program.
Now, to what extent have the new hot lanes ameliorated those congestion problems and the problems of your constituents in the north-south corridor?
Well, you know, I think right now it's a wait-and-see sort of scenario. Not everyone is completely comfortable. I've done some of the town halls. You have some people that were upset. We also have some misconceptions that we have to deal with and explain exactly how the hot lanes work. But what we have seen are the people who are taking the opportunities to use them are very, very happy with them. Now, naturally, we still have the people who are carpooling and using the slug lines, and those people are still happy with what's in front of them. But as I said, the scenario of the wait-and-see situation is as more and more people start to use them, what will the traffic pattern look like? And as well as for some of those people who are upset under the concept saying that they just couldn't afford it. So what we're hoping is that we'll see some of the relief of some of the congestion in our regular lanes, because hopefully we'll get more people on those hot lanes. But honestly, time will tell on that. It's very, very new. We've only been open, a month and a half now, fully functioning. So we'll definitely see what the outcome of that is as we move forward.
Mr. Speaker, that's the latest example of a public-private partnership, those new hot lanes.
Yeah, I think it's a great example, Woody. Michael was talking earlier about an infrastructure bank where you get a public and private investment. Well, we've had that in Virginia through the PPTA, the Public-Private Transportation Act, since 1994-95. And the express lanes going around 495 and coming down to Stafford along 95, I think, are good examples of how that can work. It's not cheap. It's going to, in high congestion times, morning commutes, evening commutes, it's relatively expensive. But every car on that express lane is one less car on the regular 95 or 495. I have and a lot of this is anecdotal, but I have a good friend who lives in the Mount Vernon area and works at Tyson's Corner. And he said the express lanes have taken an hour off his commute each way. And so he's happy to pay $5 or whatever it costs on 495. And I think we'll find the same on the 95 express lanes. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to convince Arlington to let us come all the way in with express lanes. And I know they're also talking about looking at the express lanes on 66 on the corridor coming in from Manassas from the west. And this 95 express lane cost the private sector about $1 billion. I'm not sure the state has the resources to be able to do something like that. So these public-private partnerships are very, very necessary.
I guess there have been a couple of examples that have not been as well received. For example, in the Hampton Roads area, the Elizabeth Crossing public-private partnership, and then the Route 460 experiment.
Yeah, 460 was not a public-private partnership. Okay. That was really a design-build plan that was mishandled in certain ways. On the tolls in Hampton Roads, I'm not as familiar with that as I am on the Northern Virginia tolls, but it seems to me that was an opportunity that the VDOT gave the private companies to collect tolls on bridges so that they could get their money up and running to build the other part of the project. Probably not a good decision either. But I think we're going to find that the 495 express lanes and the 95 express lanes are going to be very beneficial, not just to those that are riding in them, but to those who are riding on 95 and 495 with decreased traffic. VDOT's doing a survey on that as we speak, on how many less people are riding in 95 because of the express lanes, and we'll be coming out with that information shortly, I hope.
Great. Delegate Cole, have you heard from constituents about the new hot lanes?
Yes, I have, and it's been a little bit of a mixed bag. Some people, who used to ride the hot lanes on the off hours for free, they're upset about having to pay the toll. But I've also heard from people who say the extra capacity that those lanes brought, because what they did was they expanded part of the lanes from 2 lanes to 3 lanes and then built them farther south into Stafford. So I have heard from people who say that since they've opened up and started operation, their commute time has dropped. So that's the kind of the bottom line, is we've got to increase capacity. Eventually, we need to build those all the way down to Spotsylvania. Of course, that'll take years before that happens.
Right. Let's talk about a bill that you have been pursuing this session to do away with some inequities in regard to asset forfeitures.
Yes. I put in legislation this year to require a conviction before assets could be forfeited in criminal cases. Under current law in Virginia, some assets, depending on the criminal offense, can be taken from someone even though they were never convicted of a crime. And I just think that's fundamentally wrong. If you haven't been convicted of a crime, you shouldn't be in danger of losing, money or property that you own. But it passed the House without any difficulty. However, it ran into trouble at the Senate Finance Committee, and so they tabled it in order to study the issue further. I know some the Commonwealth's attorneys and sheriffs had concerns that it might affect their budgets in the future. Though I will say, I think by and large, most Commonwealth's attorneys and sheriffs in the Commonwealth are using the program responsibly. It was designed years ago to try to take the profit out of crime. And certainly that's a noble goal and something we want to support. but I just think it's fundamentally wrong that you could be in danger of losing, your property or even money when you were never convicted of a crime.
So this bill would require a conviction before
Yes,
an asset
it would
forfeiture.
require a conviction, criminal conviction, before asset forfeiture proceedings could go forward.
So I take it you're going to continue to pursue the
Yep,
effort.
yep. If the Lord and the voters allow me to return, then I'll certainly take up this banner again next year.
You know, Woody, it really is incredible when you stop and think about it, that you can have assets taken away from you by the state without a conviction of any kind. It's just, to me, it just seems so contrary to everything that we believe in our rule of law and our Constitution, and why it didn't pass the Senate is beyond me.
So there's just no due process there, is there?
No, not at all.
None whatsoever. Let's talk about hunting and fishing, because I know that's something you have pursued on behalf of your constituents.
Right. Well, yes, we passed the bill. Basically what the bill did was it just moved us into the 21st century. It just says, so now if I'm going fishing or hunting and I have my license, I can keep an electronic copy of it. I don't have to actually hold the paper copy of it with me. And it's a fairly simple bill, very easy bill to deal with. It's one of those bills where after it was presented, people said, oh yeah, I'm not really sure why we don't have that already. So it wasn't the most contentious bill of the group. So we've had the opportunity, and that's the thing, and that's why we do this. Just like a lot of us were talking, you start to realize as you have more and more of these conversations that there are different things that impact different people that you may not know anything about. And when you have the opportunity to meet with your constituents, to sit down and talk with them and say, okay, what can we do to help? Because honestly, that's our job. Whether we agree on an issue or disagree on an issue, there are a group of people that we represent, and we have the opportunity to help them, allow them to have their voice be heard. I tell everybody all the time, our job is not to always have the answer. Our job is to create an environment where collectively we can find the answer. And that's how a lot of these bills, come to fruition. We have the opportunity to meet those groups. We have those opportunities to come into those homeowners associations. We have the opportunity just to meet people in the grocery store. Just like the other bill that we had that gained all of the attention was dubbed the body camera bill, which actually came from Paramount Pictures reached out to me, and they asked me to host a special screening of the movie Selma before it launched nationwide. And we hosted at our movie theater. We had a panel discussion about kind of what was going on in the community, how to build relationships. Our chief of police, Chief Hudson, was there. We had pastors. We had some of everyone. Sold out crowd of hundreds of people. And we started having the back and forth of the conversations. And I remember I had an opportunity to talk to one of my sheriffs. And he was talking about the opportunity to have body cameras and how he felt like if he had it during a situation that he went through, how it would help him. And so what we wanted to do was to create an opportunity, just like as we were sitting here talking about crime and some of these other things that people are going through in their communities. I said, okay, so what can we do to add transparency? To add openness, to build these relationships within our communities, between our law enforcement and between our communities. And that's what we've started to build. And that was actually built off of some of those conversations we were able to have through those community discussions. And like I said, just like that, that's also how the fishing and hunting license came to be. You have a lot of these conversations with people and they say, well, you know what, this would make things a lot easier if you could do this.
Great. Mr. Speaker, there's been a lot of discussion this session about ethics reform. I know that you had charged Randy Minshew with the responsibility of putting together a number of bills, which he has done a great job on. Tell us what's likely to happen.
The House has passed a pretty significant ethics reform bill, and the Senate has passed a bill which isn't identical, and so they'll be in conference, and I'm hopeful that we'll come to some good agreements pretty soon. I think the public is asking for this, and I believe that we've done a good job in meeting those requests. Todd Gilbert also has been a big help on our side on that.
So what are some of the key elements of that ethics reform legislation?
We're going to have a limit on gifts of $100, and that's both what we call tangible and intangible. It can be tickets to a sporting event or a dinner or something tangible that you put in your office. At limit of $100. And we increase the transparency, the number of times that you have to report your gifts. we have, in 2014, we created a committee to give advice on ethical questions, and that committee is going to do things like approve travel. If I have an opportunity to go to the National Speakers Conference, I have to get permission from this committee, this group, to take that trip. So that ought to limit some of the trips that are more frivolous than educational. And I think by and large it's a pretty good bill.
To what extent, if any, does it apply to the Governor's Opportunity Fund?
That's another issue that we passed legislation last year that basically said a governor cannot take a contribution from someone who he's using the Opportunity Fund to try and entice them to come and do business in the Commonwealth. The governor vetoed that bill, but I think we'll have another one going to him. We're going to try that again.
Great. Redistricting, that's always an issue, and of course you've got privileges in elections. I know there's been further discussions about that this session.
Yeah, in every session we have a discussion about how we could better do the redistricting process. You know, once every 10 years we do redistricting. It's the year after the census, so the next redistricting won't be done until 2021. So it's several years away. But that doesn't stop people from putting in bills every year. We're looking at them and considering them, but it's not something that we have to act on this session because, as I said, redistricting is 6 years away, and so we have plenty of time to take a look at various ideas on how to improve the process.
Great. Now, what about standards of learning? What are you hearing from your constituents about that?
Well, here's the thing. What you realize is when you start having these conversations with the parents and some of the things that are going on that are impacting their children, and again, myself as a former teacher, you know, I've been able to see this firsthand. You know, just like, again, going back to one of the bills that we put in, I put in a bill allowing the WIDA test to be used as an alternative assessment for the 11th grade reading test for English language learners. Now, what we realized was you ended up having students that were having to take both tests, regardless of the situation, but we could only use the 11th grade SOL reading test as one of their assessments. So, you know, so some of the things, and again, some of the conversations that we had the opportunity to have with parents who felt like we're just over-testing our children. And what is the outcome of this, and what are we really trying to accomplish? Naturally, I think it's easy to say that collectively the group realized that we need to continue to make adjustments, and we've come a long way since last year as well, but there's still much further that we have to go.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here. Speaker of the House, Bill Howell.
Thank you.
Delegate Mark Cole. Delegate Michael Futrell.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.